Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We find ourselves in Cleveland, Ohio. Move over Browns, move over Cavaliers. Let's move the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame out of the way. We're not going to talk about Lake Erie. It's the American Sports History Podcast hosted by my brother, a mentor, a friend, Peter Ray. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing this live from Los Angeles. 347-205-9631. Catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports podcast platforms, wherever you subscribe to podcasts, powered now by Mancini Media. So without further ado, as they lay that red carpet down, put the podium in its place, hand off the mic, more of him, less of me. First of all, Peter, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third of all, you are bringing a great guest in here again on your show, my friend.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well. I have a YouTube channel. I make history videos, and the title of the channel is Peter J. Ray, R-E-A. And you're absolutely right. Tonight's guest is from Pearl River, New York, lives in Pearl River, New York. He has a show called Geek Talk with Tyler, and he's got a new show on the Mark Mancini Network, Talk Geek with Tyler. Welcome to the show, Mr. Tyler Brooke.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, Tyler, first of all, based on my notes here, we're talking about what exactly the meaning of geek is. I got here comic books, and I know we're going to talk about Star Trek and Star Wars. Could you give us a description of what is the meaning of geek culture or the geek realm?
Well, I'm going to answer your question with another question of my own. Who's your favorite Batman actor?
I guess Adam West. Was that the first TV show, the original TV, and back in the 60s?
See, that's where you and I are different. I, on the other hand, prefer the Kevin Conroy Batman, the one from the Batman the Animated Series and pretty much every other show on DCAU and many other different incarnations. So people like me are geeks in the sense that we focus on not just the mainstream stuff, but the stuff that, in my opinion, worth looking into, whether it's animated shows or video games, comics, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a fine line between pop culture and geek culture. Geek culture looks more into it, whereas, say, pop culture, a lot of people tell me that they're Marvel fans. So I'm asking, so who are you hoping to see for the MCU? They just say, the what and the who? It's like, you're just Marvel movie fans.
Okay. Now, how does science fiction play into this? You have I remember I read most of the Jules Verne books, who, from what I understand, is the father of science fiction. How does science fiction play into geek culture?
Well, it does influence it greatly, whether it's things like, say, your Star Wars, Star Trek, or even lesser-known series like, say, Ben 10. But I want to give a quick shout-out to Mark Mancini for choosing Zodax for my Tournament of Power episode. Or even things like Battleship Yamato, an old anime from way back when. It's a fine line, but when you think about it, science fiction is just only a glimpse away from actual reality. Like, let me ask you something. Are you familiar with the Jetsons?
Of course.
Okay, and remember when they had FaceTiming back then? Back then, it was just something we thought could never happen. But now, thanks to the modern marvel of technology, FaceTiming just seems like an everyday thing. So I believe that it's just a spectrum from what could be possible to what is actually possible.
Albert from Poway, California. Hi, Peter and Tyler. Here are my all-time villains, Mr. Freeze, Joker, Penguin, Riddler, and Egghead.
Well, those are some definitely great villains as far as DCAU goes. As far as DCAU villains, I've always liked Lobo. He is basically Boba Fett from Star Wars, except he can regenerate himself, has been kicked out of heaven and hell, and has even duked it out with Superman a bunch of times.
You know, we talked on the phone preparing for this interview, and I mentioned that I thought we could talk about Star Wars and Star Trek. Now, the interesting thing is Star Trek. I was born in 1960, and I remember when Star Trek, the original TV series, came out in 1966. I was too young really to watch it, but it only lasted till '69. So that's, I guess, 66. So anyway, that's 3 years, and to me, what's interesting is the fact that it came to an end, and then some of the people who worked, they all had to do something else, and they went on with their lives. But then this thing was sort of germinating, and then reruns came in. And who could have imagined when it was canceled in June of '69, what would be the future of Star Trek?
Well, it's funny that you think that, because we have all these different incarnations. Personally, as a Gargoyles fan, #KeepItchingGargoyles, I've always liked the Next Gen cast. But it's funny that a lot of them do end up working for voiceovers. Leonard Nimoy, for example, provided the voice for Galvatron in Transformers the movie. Or even the original Uhura voiced Elisa's mom in the Gargoyles series. Let's call Space Fan that one. Gargoyles is full of Star Trek actors. Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis, Michael Dorn, LeVar Burton, Matthew Brewer, just to name a few.
Gary from Norman, Oklahoma. Any thoughts on Star Wars? I think it has played its course. How many do we have to see? Love Star Trek.
Excellent question, Gary. That's the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Trek is an adventure series where you're just going off and finding yourself in the cosmos. Whereas Star Wars is just an intergalactic war. And honestly, I really felt like it could have concluded after the prequels, which were okay, not as great as the originals. But I think at this point it's just a capitalism thing. Like, I've spoken to many people about this who work in the industry. Industry speaking, it's all about brand recognition. Like, nope, if you ask people, like, say, 30 years ago about Guardians of the Galaxy, no, they'll say, what is the who now? Nowadays, they're like, oh, yeah. And the only reason it got that popular is because we slapped the Marvel logo on front of it. And granted, Guardians of the Galaxy was always a thing, but it just became more popular once we slapped the Marvel movie logo on it. So it's one of those attention-grabbing things. And now that Disney's pretty much done Star Wars, they're just going to make more of it until they milk that cow dry. And maybe even a little more after that. Personally, I think it should have stopped, but there you go.
Rick from Augustine, Florida. Any ideas on Aquaman, Black Widow, Thor, and Doctor Strange?
And characters or movies? Because as far as movies are concerned, I did see the new Doctor Strange movie. I'm not going to lie, it was visually wonderful, but the plot was just... I mean, here's what I don't understand. Why didn't they just do a frickin' Rick and Morty thing where, what's her name, Scarlet Witch just found kids in another universe that lost their mom. It's like, oh, you lost your mom. I need kids. Boom. I'm going to transfer myself there. Straight up Rick and Morty, that shit. Thor was visually capturing. A very great story. Great intro to the character, as was Aquaman. So we're going to have a Amber Turd change. And Black Widow, she was an interesting character. I also don't feel like she deserved her own movie. Maybe series, but not movie. But there you go. That's just my 2 cents on Black Widow.
The thing about Star Trek, you had the original TV series and then a series of movies that came out. And the thing that I, loved about it was that Captain Kirk, had a sense of humor. I mean, he had responsibility, but he could, and I think that's really helpful. Like where in the Next Generation, Picard is pretty serious, and then the original series you had that it was Spock and the Dr. McCoy. There's Spock being always unemotional and being insulted by Dr. McCoy, but not letting it bother him or responding sort of in a rational way. So those are the things that I really enjoyed about that. Of course, these unique characters. So, any thoughts on Captain Kirk and Spock and McCoy?
Honestly, well, I'm going to give a shout out right now to my dad, Francis Brooke, who selected Captain Kirk for my upcoming Squid Game episode. See how far he gets. And they're all unique characters in their own way. And that helps give birth to many other great characters. Like I've seen a real Sheldon Howard dynamic between those two, for those of you that watch The Big Bang Theory. And, it's funny. Inspiration really does come from everywhere. You never know where to look.
What's interesting is how you had Star Trek from 66 to 69, and then the first Star Wars coming out in 77, and that seemed to revive, and then it seemed like the two sort of reinforced each other. It seems like the popularity of Star Wars, the first movie, which was number 4, led to them making the Star Trek movies, which they made quite, I don't know how many, maybe 10. Do you want to talk about Star Trek and Star Wars, how they've influenced each other and sort of supported each other? Do you agree with that?
I don't think they just did that. I believe they've helped influence and inspire many forms of science fiction out there. I believe a lot of the times it's all cat and mouse. Like DC and Marvel comics are without a doubt the two most popular comics, without a doubt. And a lot of the times they're piggybacking off each other. Marvel has the Lizard, therefore DC Comics must have Killer Croc. Marvel has Tigra, therefore DC has Cheetah. Marvel has Moon Knight, DC has Batman. Marvel has Hyperion, DC has Superman, and back and forth with this little cat and mouse of whose line is it anyway.
I like the scene where Star Trek Generations movie where Captain Kirk dies, and then I've quoted him a lot. I think it's a great quote. He says, "It was fun," and I thought it was a good. The guy's dying, and he has that to say that that he enjoyed his life, and I liked that. I like that scene. Yeah. Do you have any scenes from Star Trek that come to mind that you thought you really enjoy from seeing the movie or the episodes more than once?
I've always enjoyed Wrath of Khan, whereas Spock's last words were, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," or in this case, the one. And it definitely shows a lot about prioritizing, but it's just self-sacrifice or doing what needs to be done for the good of others.
And then there's the scene where one of the they end up in San Francisco, Star Trek movie in San Francisco, like nowadays, and which is the past for them. And Kirk says, "They're still using money, and we need to get some."
That is funny. And it's funny because I know a lot of people that when we go out, we like say grab dinner, I'm paying, and they're just like, "Oh, can I bend you way back?" I'm like, "What? Are you allergic to money?" I don't think I've ever actually seen you handle money. It's always Venmo payments with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenes that come to mind. That we used to have we had the box set of Star Wars 4, 5, and 6. The first 3 that came out, and all these scenes that my son and we watched the movies over and over and over, and all these scenes come to mind where. I think Chewbacca was playing kind of a chess game, and then one guy said, "Let the Wookiee win." Do you have any, or when the Princess Leia says, "Oh, I love you," and Han says, "I know." All these. Do you have any scenes from Star Wars that are your favorites?
Honestly, not as much. I do prefer Lord of the Rings over Star Wars. But I will say the original trilogy was great for what it was. But I got to say, one of my quotes that I use a lot from Star Wars was, "I thought they smelled bad on the outside." I never realized how much I learned myself using that quote.
And then there's going back to Star Trek, one of the movies where they were quoting this one of the what was he? I can't remember what alien he was, but he talked about quoting Shakespeare in the original whatever their language was, and they were talking about how he said, "Do you prick us?" He's talking about these. It was a Shakespeare quote, and he was angry, and he said, "If you wrong us, do we not revenge?" So that was nice getting some Shakespeare in Star Trek, and. So any other?
I never realized how much Shakespeare influenced our lives. Even the stuff we don't even know. Like Edgar was actually a Shakespearean term, believe And that's something my co-host for my Shakespearean episode, quick shout out to Crispy Chan, who brought this to my awareness. And just like myself, she is also a Gargoyles fan, mostly because of the Shakespeare stuff, but I have a feeling that a whole bunch of other things played into it. So you never realize how much Shakespeare plays into our lives, even when we're not thinking about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that you're aware of that, because it's not that many people are. And in the old days, people really were. It was more a part of popular culture. Guys like William Shakespeare and the ancient Greeks, and but not so much today, because I guess because there's so much else. There's just so much going on today, and so much information available that the ancient Greeks and Romans have been forgotten. Go ahead.
Even modern comics have influenced the way we talk, whether it's terms like riddle me this, or referring to someone's weakness as their kryptonite, or even the term like bizarro actually came from Jesus Comics.
And then there's the scene from one of the Star Trek movies where Captain Kirk says to this guy, he says, Khan, or to Khan, I guess Wrath of Khan, he says, Khan, you got to give me a minute, whatever. And then Khan says, "Oh, I give the noble captain and his crew 2 minutes." I thought that was a good scene. Go ahead.
Like in Timers are one of those things. Like in Dragon Ball Z, Frieza says the planet's going to explode in 5 minutes, and it took a lot longer than 5 minutes.
My son and I were talking about. What was it? There's a news about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker, and how obviously it fell apart. And he said, I think it was just came out recently, a new show where Obi-Wan he said he apologized. Of course, here he is, his student becomes Darth Vader. That's pretty depressing. And then he apologized to him because, this guy, he's not even human, really. It was just horrible. When episode 3 ended, it was just horrible. I always felt sick because, Anakin's there. It's all this fire, and I think he lost both his legs, and he was eventually transformed into. He said he was sorry it was just a very sad. My son showed me that scene, and it was just very. But it was nice that he showed, that he cared about this guy, and he felt bad that his student turned into this villain.
Well, I feel like that's a trope. Hero turns villain, villain turns hero. Honestly, I prefer it the other way around, where the villain becomes the hero, because it definitely shows character growth. It's easy to give into temptation, but it shows a true character's admiration, where they can admit, holy shit, I messed up. How can I make amends? You really don't see that anymore. A lot of the times it's just entitlement, just for the sake of entitlement. Which is why a lot of times I can relate to characters like they were villains turned hero in Dinobot from the Beast Wars series, another sci-fi series. He was originally a Predacon, but then teamed up with the Maximals, went back to being a Predacon, but realized this is wrong, and then eventually saved all the prehistoric humans so that the history will continue as it does so, and serves as one of the greatest episodes of the Transformers continuity since ever.
Yeah, and then there's the famous scene with when Darth Vader, here Luke, finds out this is his father. That's a great line. No, I'm your father. No, it can't be true. And then when Darth Vader picks up that guy or the bad guy and throws him down that hole, and that ends up leading to his death, and then he takes off his hat at the end to talk to his son that he's about to die, and then later he's apparently in heaven, sort of a heavenly being with Obi-Wan. My son's like, this guy did so many evil things, and now he's in heaven, and he felt like it was nice how he did a heroic act, when he betrayed his evil master and then died because of it.
It's just funny when you think about it. It's like Slade. He pretty much caused genocide and killed a lot of people, but his last act earned him a spot in heaven. Yeah,
so that's anyway. There's a lot of good And I like the scene where let's see, what's his name? Han Solo meets that guy. He's trying to, he owes money, and he goes, and he says he's going to pay to this guy, and he goes, well, I got the money, and he goes, well, I don't have it with me, stuff like that. These different. Do you have any other memorable scenes from Star Wars or Star Trek?
Not off the top of my head. It feels like a lot of times when something's parodied, Star Wars and Star Trek are definitely one of the few. And a lot of the times I do find myself talking like the ever-popular Captain Kirk. A dramatic pause within every sentence because he is the captain.
Then there was the scene with Data where I think it was a movie with Next Generation, and he ends up getting shot like I don't know how many times, but it doesn't affect him, And then he's kind of moving around his chest, and then the person finally, I think it was this woman who didn't know who he was, and then he says, after getting shot 20, he says, "Oh, greetings," because he didn't get hurt anyway. But that was a pretty funny scene. Go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you. That is very funny. And it just shows the stuff that would be harmful to us would be trivial to all the other supernatural beings. Like, there's one scene I don't get with the whole Superman movies. There's like, he's getting arrested, and he's got these basic handcuffs. It's like, this is Superman you're dealing with. Unless you have a kryptonite gun, those cops aren't going to do anything. He can break out of that.
Yeah, it's funny. When my father was growing up in the 20s and 30s, the two big heroes were Superman and Tarzan. Have you gotten into Tarzan at all?
I'm familiar with Tarzan, a man raised by apes. And it's funny, a lot of people say that there's this fan theory in the Disneyverse that Tarzan is Elton, not his brother. I looked into that. Not only is Tarzan originally from England, but the chronological math does not add up. So, very first was Tarzan, and speaking of Tarzan, or a Tarzan-like character, what I would like to see for Marvel movies would be a Kazar in the Savage Land comics, where he's taking on Sauron, this strong and unlucky mutant who has the ability to hypnotize people and absorb their powers. That could be a very good movie. There's actually a very famous scene in geek culture where Spider-Man is talking to Sauron. Wait, you can manipulate DNA? Why don't you cure cancer? Sauron then says, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to make dinosaurs.
Then there's a scene where I think Picard's talking. Yeah, I guess they travel to the past, which is more like now, and past for them. And I guess they're talking, and I guess Picard says, there's no money in the future. And he goes, well, why do you guys work? And he says, oh, we work to better ourselves, which I thought was really good. I like that line.
Well, I believe we're all working in some way to better ourselves, even if we're not consciously thinking of doing so. But it's going for things like getting out there and talking to other people, or just doing something every day that scares you, or just even giving a show you probably wouldn't think of giving a shot.
Yeah, like Talk Geek with Tyler, or Geek Talk with Tyler.
Technically, both are correct. Geek Talk with Tyler is the show I made. Want to give a shout out to my buddy Rickman, who made my logo. And the Talk Geek with Tyler is the one I'm doing with Mark Mancini. It's a subtle flip, but I think it definitely works.
Have you heard of Harvey Pekar, the guy who made made these comic books, American Splendor? Are you familiar with him and that series?
I'm familiar with them through the power of geek osmosis, but can I do a whole episode dedicated to this guy? I need a little more research.
Yeah, he was a guy from Cleveland, actually, who he made his own, ended up having his own comic book and did fairly well. And we went to the cemetery here, and at his grave there are like colored pens stuck into the grass, and I guess aspiring would-be comic book creators come to pay their respects. Have you ever thought of having your own comic book, creating your own comic book?
I have, and there's this series I'm following with for the past few years. I want to make sure this goes just right. So yes, I have been thought about doing that, and I'm trying to get that off the ground. And I gotta say, anybody that still writes comics has earned my respect.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine, Scott Rudd. He's got a YouTube channel. He's been like reviewing comic books, and so I think, yeah, because we all grew up with them. At least I did, but I didn't get into it in a big way. Now you're talking about let's see, the one about what's the one with Frodo? The name of that?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah, where the trees are talking, right? The trees talk in Lord of the Rings.
Well, technically they're not trees; they're ants. They're a race of tree-like creatures. So, I think from the outside eyes, it would be like the trees are talking, but they are their own race of creatures. And
there's one scene where he says, "Frodo." You remember that scene?
Yeah, it was right at the. It was right for Frodo. There's they're trying to distract all the orcs and whatnot. So he has a small chance to drop the ring into Fires of Mount Doom.
I remember in the late '80s when I think the first Batman movie came out with Michael Keaton, and it was a really big deal. Do you remember? Are you familiar? I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah, it's actually what helped launch the DCAU continuity of all these shows and whatnot. And for those of you that are familiar with the DCAU, Batman Beyond was a great series. It definitely showed the human side feature of Batman. Batman's phenomenal. He's got all these gadgets and all this martial art and all this knowledge, but by the end of the day, Batman's still human and does succumb to age up to the point where he can't fight anymore. So he trains his son, spoiler, to become the next Batman. And if we can get old Batman to be played by Michael Keaton, that would just be so awesome.
And then there's was it Heathcliff Ledger who played the Joker and then died sometime later, and I was wondering if he was affected by that role, if that had an unhealthy effect on him, leading to his death.
Okay, I don't want to correct you on this, but you confused two characters. You said Heathcliff Ledger. Heathcliff was Garfield before Garfield became popular. Heath Ledger was the guy that played Joker, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised by that fact. Joker is one of those characters that can be played by 1,000 people, but it still wouldn't be the same Joker, because Joker's just such a wild card. He's got all this weird personality shit going on, but it's definitely become arguably Batman's most well-known enemy.
Have there, I know there's been a lot of Batman movies and Spider-Man movies. What about Superman movies? I know, back years ago it was Christopher Reeve. How about now? Are there Superman movies recently or being planned?
Honestly, I don't think so. Maybe more Justice League stuff, but I think DC needs to cut back on the Batman, Superman stuff. We get it. It already exists, but there are several other characters you can do that would be a compelling DC movie. Etrigan the Demon, Lobo, as previously mentioned, the Talk Equal Tyler episode I just did. Trying to think who else would be a good to say. Oh, if you want to get another Green Lantern movie, like one that's actually done right, that would be another great idea for a good DC movie that doesn't piggyback on Batman and Superman.
I remember when Star Wars came out in '77. It was in the theaters, and there was that was before computers and before actually even videos and DVDs, and it was like, this is kind of a weird thing with a metal guy and a furry guy, but eventually I ended up, really getting into it, and the whole thing with R2D2 and CP3O, their relationship, where CP3O is an awful funny guy, with his. You want to talk about C3PO?
Yeah, he was definitely the quote-unquote straight man of the group. And visually, looking into it the first time, it is a little weird. But you got to appreciate the art for what it was at the time. We didn't have all this highfalutin CGI technology that we do now.
Our guest has been Tyler Brooke, who has two shows, Geek Talk with Tyler and Talk Geek with Tyler, now on the Mark Mancini Network. Looks like our time has been winding down here. Do you have any final words for our audience tonight, Tyler?
I do. Follow me on Spotify, and remember, stay geeky.
Stay geeky. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Wonderful topic, really interesting, and I wish you well with your efforts. And to me, it's a fascinating topic because it's creativity, which I think is so, to me, a wonderful topic and so important in life because we all have that creative instinct, and if we can, pursue some form of creativity, it's going to be satisfying for us and help us to have a better life. So thanks so much, Tyler, for coming on the show and talking about the geek world.
Hey, so glad to be here.
Dear listener, next week we're going to have James Donaldson, and then a week after that we will be off. Mark Mancini's going to the MLB All-Star Game. I just talked to Bill North. He's going to be on August 2nd, and we have other guys who are hoping to get on. Bill North, who won 2 World Series with the Oakland A's in the early 70s, and then I've got. I just finished reading Dan Good's book on Ken Caminiti. We've got hopefully we'll get Craig Elo back. God bless Sam McDowell. He's going through a recovery. And then there's also possibility of the Steve Kerr biographer, Scott Howard Cooper. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Mr. Tyler Brooke.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.